Macca's Guides.
Hey guys, Macca here, and welcome to the hardest gaming completions of 2018. This is a yearly video series where we count down the hardest and the longest console game completions of the year. Previous winners of this award include games like Elite Dangerous, Gears of War 4, and then last year it was Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. The rules for the video are pretty simple. We're going to obviously count only games that have come out in the year 2018, and we're only going to count the main base 1000 or the base platinum trophy, as DLC makes things way too overly complicated for no good reason. Obviously, we'll also be counting games where you need to achieve the entire achievement or trophy list. The third rule is that we will be ignoring extremely obscure games, as there isn't enough of a player base to give an accurate representation of that game's difficulty. So instead of having improper or inaccurate information, we're just going to ignore obscure games, and hopefully you guys actually recognize all the games on the list as a result. And as for the list itself, people are always wondering how I calculate these. So for this year, we're doing a 70% skill and a 30% time consideration for all of the games on the list. This will allow us to have a good mix of games that are extremely skill intensive, but also allow games that have just an absolute crazy grind to be included in the list also. Before we get started, I'm going to put some names of some games on screen, and these are the games that were considered to be on the list and were very difficult, but for one reason or another did not make our top 15. Next up, let's quickly count number 15 through to 11, and then we'll get into detail about all of the top 10 games. At number 15, we have NBA 2K19. At number 14, we have Mutant Year Zero. At number 13, we have Rad Rogers. At number 12, we have Moonlighter. And at number 11, we have Metal Gear Survive. Now we're ready for the big top 10. We're going to start off our list at the number 10 spot with Sea of Thieves, a game that took an incredibly ridiculous amount of hours to complete. The achievement list is so ridiculous, or was so ridiculous, that I actually considered making a video about how I think Rare should change it. And up until last month, no one had completed the 1000 gamer score available in the game. The first person to complete it, though, completed it on November 17th and claimed to have played the game 8 hours per day, every day, for the last 8 months, equating to roughly 2,000 hours. Now, for better or for worse, just 10 days after that person completed the game, Rare actually decided to alter their achievement list and make it significantly easier. For example, in the previous achievement list, you needed to get 1,000 banana crates, which was easily the one achievement that would hold everyone back, as this one was incredibly hard to get. But instead of 1,000, they have now altered it to only require 50 banana crates. Additionally, things like completing certain types of voyages, there are 3 different types of voyages, and you needed to complete each one at least 1,000 times. Now that has been knocked down to 250. That brings the entire completion time from roughly 2,000 hours to approximately 500 hours at this point, which is still an incredible investment of your time, but a lot less than it used to be. In order to grab the completion, you'll set out on at least 1,000 voyages, sail for 1,000 nautical miles, kill a ton of captains, and earn some really tricky accommodations. Although none of it is particularly skill intensive, you will come across the occasional PvP player trying to get in your way, which is why this game is ranked at number 10. For the number 9 position on the list, we will be talking about Monster Hunter World, a game that takes most people on average approximately 300 hours to complete, but a game that is actually completed by close to 1 in 1,000 people who have played it, with a completion percentage of approximately 0.1%. You'll start off your completion by going through the campaign and then working through the kind of soft ending, and then working your way through 5, 6, 7, and 8 star assignments on your way to slaying the final monster in the game. Now, after completing the actual game, you still have quite a bit more to do. You will need to play 100 multiplayer matches, obtain a large amount of currency, slay some elder dragons, and capture some of the rarer monsters. But the main time sink in this game is for obtaining a miniature crown and a giant crown for every single monster in the hunting log. Now, when you slay a monster in the game, that monster is going to have a size, and most monsters in the game are of average size. But if the monster is incredibly small, you will get a miniature crown, and if it is incredibly big, you will get a giant crown. And this depends completely 100% on RNG and chance. So essentially, you'll just go around slaying the same monsters over and over and over again, hoping that eventually one of them will be either extremely small or extremely large, and that'll tick off one box for one monster among many. You'll then have to do it for every monster in the game, which takes a very long time and a lot of patience. For the fact that the game takes an incredibly long amount of time and actually does require a decent amount of skill, it'll be slotted in at this position this year. In at the number 8 position, we have a game that most people watching have probably played, and that is Red Dead Redemption 2, which at first glance may not seem like a particularly hard game to complete, but there is actually some skill involved. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is set your sights on completing the campaign, which takes most people approximately 80 hours. However, almost 17% of people across Xbox Live have done this, so your odds are looking good so far. You'll also have to make sure that as you're going through the game, you don't miss any of the honor missions, as doing so will require you to restart. Next up though, we'll have to go for attaining 100% completion in the game, which requires us to, on top of completing the story missions, complete a bunch of the stranger missions, find a heap of collectibles, approximately 100 of them. We'll then need to discover a ton of different animals, fish species, horse breeds, plants, and weapons. We'll need to max out our character, we'll need to kill a bunch of legendary animals, play a bunch of the table games, and complete all 90 of the game's challenges, which can take an hour each. Now, some of the challenges are quite easy, but some of them are kind of total BS. For example, the game has a challenge where you have to win 3 hands of blackjack with 3 or more hits. Now, if you know anything about blackjack, that doesn't happen very often, so essentially what you'll do is you'll go to a blackjack table and play for approximately 3 or 4 hours, hitting non-stop, just to maybe eventually win a couple of hands. Now, after completing the challenges, you'll have still quite a bit to go by making sure that you study and skin every species of animal across the entire game. The game has a total of 162 different animals, many of them being birds, which can be incredibly hard to spot in the sky and is incredibly hard to actually study. So after finding all 162 of those animals, some being incredibly rare, you'll actually have to kill a bunch of them as well to make sure to skin them in order to grab the zoologist and skin deep achievements or trophies. But we are not yet done. Arguably, the hardest and most time-consuming single-player achievement is actually the one for getting 70 gold medals in story missions. Now, I don't know if you've played a lot of the story missions, but personally, I was earning mostly silvers and bronzes upon my first completion. And even on my second time around through many of the missions, getting gold still seemed like it was pretty difficult. You'd have to maintain very high percentages of accuracy, complete the missions incredibly quickly, and also do a bunch of miscellaneous tasks during those missions if you wanted any chance at gold. And that is actually currently the second rarest achievement in the game. The rarest one is an online achievement. And yeah, this game has an entire online component to it, which you will need to do a whole bunch of things like craft ammunition, own horses, and reach rank 50. And all of those things and reaching rank 50 are an incredibly long grind, which will require quite a bit of dedication from you if you plan to attain them. Some people do boost them, but even when boosting, these can take very, very long. So the skill of the single player gold medals plus the time commitment of getting 100% and playing online makes Red Dead Redemption 2 our number 8 position on this year's list. Now, number 7 might actually surprise a couple of people, but we're going to put Unravel 2 in this position. And the reason it'll surprise some people is because Unravel 1 wasn't a particularly hard game. Even I was able to grab the 1000, I made some video guides, and for the most part you just had to kind of play through the game, not die in every chapter, grab some collectibles, and you were done. And Unravel 2 has many of those same themes, but kind of builds on them. So in order to complete Unravel 2, you'll have to obviously beat the game. You'll then have to go through each level individually without dying, which is a lot harder in Unravel 2 than it was in Unravel 1 because the levels themselves are a lot longer. They have a lot more obstacles in them, and you will be controlling both characters on screen, which means you have 2 times the opportunity to die. Additionally, that's actually not the hardest part of the game. The hardest part of the game is earning the gold medals in each of the levels, which are based on the amount of time required to complete the level. And the cutoffs for the gold times are incredibly thin. Even on a perfect run, you're looking at only being maybe 5 to 15 seconds faster than the gold medal time on a 10-minute level. For most of the gold medals, if you die one time or don't do a specific time-saving move, the entire run is over and you can just restart the level. Now, the actual hardest achievement or trophy in the game is for beating all of the bonus levels in under 45 minutes in one go. That's not an easy task by any means. Most people are going to take a couple of hours their first time through, and even after memorizing all of the obstacles, you're still looking at a lot of skill in order to do them in 45 minutes. Now, a lot of these can be made a little bit easier by having a local co-op partner, but we live in the year 2018 and no one's playing local co-op, let's be honest with ourselves. And even if you are, finding someone that is equally skilled as you in a game like Unravel isn't necessarily going to be the easiest thing. For the number 6 spot, we have Dead Cells. Out of all the games on the list, this was the only game that I almost personally completed, but didn't quite make it in the final couple of steps. Now, Dead Cells on its own is a pretty tough game, and most people will struggle to beat it even a single time. But that's not what makes the completion so difficult. Instead, every time you beat the game, the final boss drops what's known as a stem cell. You can pick up these stem cells and then deposit them into a machine at the beginning of a new game in order to bring up the difficulty. Now, standard difficulty is 0, but there's also a 1, 2, 3, and 4 stem difficulty. The last one the game refers to as Nightmare. And if you're familiar with the game, in between most of the levels, there are health fountains, which can recharge your flask. But in Nightmare difficulty, these health fountains don't exist, meaning you need to complete the entire game with only 1 flask. Additionally, all of the hits you take cause infection, so you will take damage over time, and if you get hit too many times, you die even if you have life remaining on your health. Additionally, as you progress your way up through the difficulties, all of the enemies on every level will begin to be replaced with harder enemy types instead. Now, if you are crazy enough to go through the game on all of the difficulties and actually beat it on 4 cell difficulty, you may or may not be done the game by now, but you're also going to have to complete every single boss battle without getting hit, which isn't incredibly hard, but can be quite tricky on some of the bosses. And additionally, you will need to complete the game with what is called the Cursed Sword. And that is a weapon that when being held, you die in 1 hit. You'll actually see a video of me completing the final boss with the Cursed Sword. Now, there are definitely a lot of really great strategies posted online, and there's a lot of small tips and tricks you can use to make the game a lot more manageable. But at the end of the day, it's still incredibly challenging, incredibly difficult, and because of its style of game, there are a lot of random factors. So for example, you could be having a really great run, which can be ruined by a string of unlucky weapon spawns or shop spawns, and that can make completing the final boss battle really difficult. Because if you're not unlocking the proper upgrades as you go through, you'll alter your damage output or your health, and that can really change things up. Now, luckily, the game isn't incredibly long. For most people, they'll be completing it within under 80 hours, and according to the Xbox Live percentages, about 1 in 500 people who play the game do complete it, so the odds aren't incredibly stacked against you, but it will be challenging nonetheless. In at the number 5 position is another game that may actually surprise quite a few people, and that is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. And before you start angrily writing a YouTube comment down below, you'll want to hear me out. Now, obviously, there are a ton of different things to do in Call of Duty Black Ops 4, and a lot of them aren't all that difficult. You'll have to prestige your character and work on a couple of multiplayer achievements, which could take around 40 to 50 hours. On top of that, you'll have to complete some specialist tutorials, which also is not quite a difficult task. The difficult stuff comes with, first off, the Zombies mode, where you need to first complete all 4 of the level's main Easter eggs, which can be quite difficult and does require a good team of 4 players really cooperating. Additionally, after completing all of the Easter eggs, you'll have to prestige 25 weapons in Zombies, which could take over an hour to 2 hours for each weapon. So that's going to be a long grind. Now, where the skill comes in is actually in the Blackout mode, because you will be required to play quite a bit of Blackout in order to unlock all of the Blackout characters. Now, for those unfamiliar with Blackout, it is the Battle Royale equivalent for the Black Ops game, so think of it like Fortnite or like PUBG, for example. And in this mode, there will be randomly spawning items all over the world that can spawn in things like specific buildings or supply drops. And when you look through these supply drops, you can find a random item. And then that random item will set you on a challenge. For example, a challenge can be something like kill an enemy with a frag grenade and then make sure you place in the top 3 in the game. And this is kind of where the challenge comes. You need to unlock all of the characters in the Blackout mode. However, finding the items required to unlock these characters is quite tricky and can only happen 1 in every 10 to 1 in every 30 matches. Even when you do actually unlock these items and get them into your inventory, you'll need the appropriate skill to complete the challenges on the card and in many instances win the game, which is another thing that can impede a lot of people. Now, no doubt there are a lot of people out there that are just incredible at Blackout or Battle Royale games in general, and those people can find these quite easy, but for the general population, they're not going to be unlocking these characters at a rapid pace, and this will require a lot of practice and a lot of specialization in this game mode in particular. So pair the fact up that you need to be an expert in Zombies and an expert in Blackout, and Blackout does require you to be generally good against other people online. We have a pretty tough and a pretty long completion in Call of Duty Black Ops 4, probably taking most people over the 200-hour mark. The next game on our list is brought to you by Xbox Game Pass. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Xbox Game Pass, it's a service that offers unlimited access to over 100 Xbox games. You can start your 14-day free trial or get 1 month for just $1 using the link in the description. Now, the game at number 4 is a game that I am all too familiar with. It is a part of Xbox Game Pass, and that game is PUBG, aka PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which did officially receive achievements and trophies in 2018. Now, there are a lot of different layers to the PUBG completion, and the first thing you'll probably want to focus on is just getting good and winning your first 10 chicken dinners, making sure you win a solo, duos, and squads match. Now, even in the best case scenario, if you win all 10 of your chicken dinners in squads, on average, most people are looking at 250 games to be played in order to win their first 10, just based off of the fact that you have a 1 in 25 chance of winning a game in squads. Now, with an already established gaming community playing this game, you're likely not to hop in and start winning right away. You do really need to develop those skills and take some time to really learn the ins and outs of the game. Now, on your way to those victories and on your way to defeats as well, you will need to be grabbing kills, and the game requires you to get about 1,000 kills. And for most people, you're looking at maybe 5 to 10 kills per hour. A really great player can probably average around 15 kills an hour, but that's assuming they're mostly winning and they're mostly dropping in on really active maps in really active areas. On top of this, you'll need to focus on getting kills in specific ways. So you'll need to grab at least 200 with close combat weapons, 100 kills at a distance. You'll need to get some crossbow kills, as well as what I think is the most difficult, 50 kills with grenades. And the reason these are all actually pretty difficult is because if you play in squads, a lot of the kills you get won't actually be counted by the game because of the bleed out system. In a scenario where you take on an entire team of 4 people and down every single one of them with an SMG, you'll actually only get progress for 1 kill instead of all 4. And the reason is because the first 3 enemies will be downed, and then they will die via bleed out when the 4th enemy is killed. What this means is you'll need to probably adapt the way you play the game in order to finish off opponents as you come across them, or play in game types like solos where people instantly die upon being shot. There are definitely some creative ways to farm some of these achievements and trophies. For example, a lot of people play in solo and then they wait till the end of the plane route in order to try to kill all of the idle players. However, even with that method, it can be quite difficult to get your 50 grenade kills and your 1,000 overall kills, especially in a game that is 100% multiplayer and does depend on your skill in comparison to the people you are playing against. Currently, the game looks to have about a 0.05% completion rate on Xbox Live, which obviously makes it incredibly rare. It does take a decent amount of skill, and most people will be playing the game for hundreds of hours. So this one's an easy slot in at number 4, but it only gets harder from here. In at the number 3 spot, we have the game Darkest Dungeon, which is already known to be a brutally difficult game. And on your first time through, you may get frustrated enough to stop playing. But if you do make it through, you may find yourself looking for a more difficult challenge, and you may find yourself looking to play on the Stygian difficulty, the hardest in the game. Now, on this difficulty, every enemy you face will have an increased amount of health by 20%, as well as a 3% increase in their crit chance. The game also works on a light meter that is used while exploring new areas, and it will deplete at the fastest possible rate of 7, and you will begin your adventure with less loot and an afflicted hero instead of a normal one. This difficulty also has a couple of failure states, and if 12 or more of your heroes are killed during your progress, you will insta-fail, and you also will insta-fail if you take more than 86 weeks to finish the game. Additionally, there are certain times in the game that you are required to lose heroes based on the fights that you partake in, so the amount of heroes you can actually lose is less than 12. And the biggest kicker of this difficulty mode is that should you fail at any point during your progress, the game will show you a game over screen and then promptly delete your save file, causing you to have to restart the entire game. Now, Darkest Dungeon does have a higher completion rate than a lot of the other games on our list, and it can actually be completed relatively quickly in even under 50 hours if you are skilled enough. However, it is a very niche genre, and because of the intense strategy required and the fact that most of the people playing this game are in fact nuts of the strategy genre, it is a very difficult completion, and for that reason easily slots in at the number 3 spot of our list. In at the number 2 position, we have Warhammer Vermintide 2, and the previous game, Vermintide 1, was actually a game on one of our previous lists a couple of years ago, and this one is also on our list for many of the same reasons. Now, going through the game and completing it will take on average about 100 hours for people who are skilled enough to do so. Now, the majority of the difficulty comes from the fact that many of the achievements or trophies can only be unlocked on the Legend difficulty. Just to give you a rough idea, the flavor text for Legend difficulty in the game says that enemies are ridiculously resistant to hits, have a ridiculous amount of health, are ridiculously aggressive, and hit ridiculously hard. Pickups are also ridiculously rare, and ranged weapons also have friendly fire. In case you're wondering what this translates to in actual numbers, the damage to the player is increased by up to 1,000%, and enemies have 300% more health than on the normal difficulties. They're also resistant to things like stagger, and there are additional kind of smaller things like the friendly fire is actually increased, and you can kill each other insanely quickly. Nonetheless, you'll go through the game, you'll work your way through the game, probably with a squad of 4 people. You'll level up to a really high power, and then have to do a bunch of miscellaneous tasks on this ridiculous difficulty in order to grab your completion. And then you can probably get started with some of the DLC, which is also somewhat difficult. In at the number 1 position for the hardest game of the year is a game that many of you may have not actually even heard about, and that game is Brawl Out, a Super Smash Bros. Type game that released in August for around $30. And the amount of time this game requires is absolutely absurd, and the amount of skill is even more absurd. To give you guys a little bit of perspective, there are currently 0 people in the world who have the completion, and the person who is closest to the completion is only about 25% of the way there. Now, the reason this game is ridiculously long is because it requires you to reach level 15 mastery with 8 different brawlers. Now, each brawler can take around 100 or more hours, so just to master 8 of them will take you maybe up to 800 hours, which is obviously a ridiculously long grind, but something that players could do without much skill. Now, where the skill comes in is actually playing the single player mode against the CPU. You'll need to obviously play a whole bunch of different characters and play against a whole bunch of different CPU, and you'll need to win a lot of those games. Now, what the game has is called an arcade tower, similar to Mortal Kombat, where you work your way through a tower of enemies. And this mode has an easy, medium, and hard difficulty. Now, what you need to do in order to unlock the achievements or trophies for these arcade towers is you need to complete them on easy, medium, and hard without losing a single life. And this is more or less impossible. Less than 1% of people on Xbox Live are able to complete the easy difficulty tower without losing a life, and the margins get even slimmer for medium and hard, with currently only 1 person in the world able to complete the hard tower without losing a stock. Even if somehow you do have enough skill to do this, you're still going to have to grind out a whole bunch of online games, winning approximately 300 1v1 online matches, playing 75 ranked games, and also winning 25 online games without getting hit. And without going into crazy amounts of detail, this game is probably a game that will never be completed. I don't want to say never, because people always amaze me with their dedication to games, and it is entirely possible that the one person who is good enough to beat the game on hard will invest another couple hundred of hours in order to master more brawlers. Nonetheless, this is going to be our number 1 most difficult game for 2018. And that is our list for the year. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have completed any of these 10 games, and if you've completed more than 2 of them, that is definitely something you should be proud of. Feel free to brag a little bit in the comments down below. Also, join me tomorrow where I'll be uploading the opposite of this video, and I count down the top 10 easiest games of the year. And in the easiest games of the year, we can actually grab 30,000 gamer score in under 25 hours. So if you're looking for some easy gamer score, you're looking to buy some cheap games, that is the video for you. Please share this video with a friend. It would be truly appreciated. A like on the video also really helps out the channel and allows the video to be seen by more people. Subscribe if you'd like to see future videos by myself. Special thanks to the amazing people on Patreon for supporting the show, and hopefully I see you guys next time. Peace.